Let's talk about all of this and more with Senator James Risch of Idaho. He's a top Republican on the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks very much for coming in. So when you say the Secretary of State was bamboozled, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is I thought that at the very beginning, those guys gave away the farm before they ever sat down at the table. Before they ever sat down at the table, they should have required that Iran give up the financing of terrorists and give up their ambitions to produce a nuclear weapon. And that means stopping enriching. Both of those were given away before they ever sat down. And after those things were given away and they sat down, they continued to give and give and give. The U.S. kept moving towards Iran's position. Iran never moved towards the U.S. position. And those of us who watched it thought that it was handled very poorly.
I know the administration strongly disagrees with you.
No question about that.
The debate will continue, but we got to keep it civil as much as we possibly can. All right, stand by, Senator. We have a lot more to discuss, much more with Senator Risch when we come back. Following the war against ISIS and their proposal for a so-called safe zone along Turkey's border with Syria to prevent ISIS terrorist forces from attacking a critical U.S. NATO ally. We're back with Senator James Risch of Idaho. He's a top Republican on the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee. Your understanding, and I know you've been briefed, Senator, what does a safe zone mean?
Well, a safe zone is an area that, in essence, Turkey and the world wants the United States to guard and keep ISIS out of and be able to put what they want there. And,
so will U.S. forces have to go into that safe zone to prevent ISIS from moving in?
I don't think that they know that there is very little appetite on the U.S. part to put boots on the ground there. But air power is incredibly important in that part of the world.
Is that a no-fly zone? Is that what
that's what they're talking about? They want a no-fly zone. And as you know, the White House and the administration have really pushed back on a no-fly zone for many, many months. But now they've softened up on it. They are talking about it. Turkey is...
So let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Turkey is a key NATO ally. They have a huge military. They have a significant air force. Why can't Turkey do that by itself? Why do they need U.S. air power and potentially ground forces to help them?
Well, Turkey probably could do that by themselves. But look, there is no substitute for U.S. air power anywhere in the world. It is that simple. And we have ways and means available to us that no other country in the world has. We are much more efficient at it. We're better at it. We have experience with it. It's interesting to see Turkey now also changing its attitude. They have tried their best to stay out of this fray. I was in Turkey once when they were shelling, when Assad's people were shelling, and they did very little to push back on it, but did back them down. Now, of course, things are blowing up on them. They got ISIS actually crossing in, doing things. Interestingly enough, the Kurds have been very effective in creating mostly a buffer zone in Syria, between Syria and Turkey.
So how do you feel about the fact that the Turks now are not only going to go after ISIS forces in Syria, but are going after Kurdish forces as well?
Yeah, generally they don't go after the Peshmerga. They are concerned about PKK. PKK has been a thorn in their side for a long, long time. There is a clear difference, I think, at least in our mind, if not in the Turks' mind, between the PKK and between the Peshmerga. The Peshmerga are incredibly efficient fighters. They've been very successful where they have fought. And I think PKK, and this is my judgment, and I suspect probably some in Turkey's judgment, that PKK is using the current state of affairs and the turmoil there to take advantage. And they've been fairly quiet over the last 18 to 24 months, but now, again, they're stepping forward. Turkey doesn't like that. They're concerned about it, and they're now having to take a second look at what's going on in their border and what they're going to have to do and how they're going to engage us and other countries to assist them.
It's potentially a turning point. Let me.
It is. That's a good point.
I want to get your reaction to what the FBI Director James Comey told me last week. He said ISIS is now the major terror threat to the U.S. homeland, even a bigger threat to the U.S. homeland than al-Qaeda. You agree with him?
I agree with him 100%. Al-Qaeda has always looked for the great, big, iconic kind of things that they could do here to make a statement. ISIS has much lower target than that. They're happy to take these lone wolves that go out and do the do these things where they will kill a handful of people or what have you. We are much more vulnerable to that than we are to the big iconic type of attacks. And as a result, and on top of that, they work differently than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was really hung up on command and control and titles and who was in charge. ISIS is much more spread out than that. They're not nearly as hung up on a chain of command and that sort of thing.
Senator Risch, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, Senator James Risch joining us from Idaho. Coming